Have you ever wondered how you manage to track GPS directions, watch for road signs, monitor the traffic in front of you, and remember your upcoming exit, literally all at the exact same time? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the fascinating world of cognitive psychology. Imagine we're walking into a modern university research laboratory right now, and we're about to investigate the active engine of the human mind that makes those everyday multitasking feats possible. We aren't just going to be talking about dry theories today. We're going to break down a rigorous, widely used laboratory practical session to uncover exactly how your brain processes information in real time. Here is a quick look at our laboratory briefing for today. We'll be covering 1. The mental workspace, 2. Short-term versus working memory, 3. The N-back experiment, 4. Analyzing cognitive load, 5. Real-world brain applications, and finally, 6. Key takeaways. Let's jump right into Section 1, the mental workspace, active processing. To really get this, let's ground some abstract neuroscience in your everyday life. Think back to that driving scenario we just talked about, or consider trying to memorize a phone number someone is reading out loud to you. As you dial the current digit, your brain is simultaneously holding on to the previous digits while also anticipating the next ones. How exactly does your brain juggle all of this at once? Well, every single second, your mind is temporarily storing information, updating it, comparing it with new data, and deciding how you should respond. This remarkable mental ability actually has a specific name in psychology: working memory. It's the temporary mental workspace where information isn't just held, but actively updated, manipulated, and retrieved during ongoing cognitive activities. You can think of it as the active engine powering your moment-to-moment awareness, reasoning, and decision-making. Moving right along to Section 2, short-term versus working, the crucial difference. What's really interesting here is how this dispels a very common myth. People often use short-term memory and working memory completely interchangeably. But in a laboratory, they mean distinctly different things. Short-term memory is simply passive storage. It's kind of like a temporary filing cabinet where you just stash a fact for a few seconds. Working memory, on the other hand, is a highly dynamic, active workspace. It doesn't merely store information. It continuously processes, compares, updates, and retrieves the data required for problem solving. Because it's so dynamic, assessing it requires a highly dynamic laboratory task. And that brings us to Section 3, the N-back experiment, verbal working memory. This is where we put this cognitive engine to the ultimate test. We're looking directly at a famous setup from the laboratory syllabus, the verbal working memory N-back task. Like any rigorous scientific experiment, it requires strictly defined variables. The independent variable, which is the factor we're actively manipulating, is the working memory load. We'll test different conditions, like a 1-back task, a 2-back task, or even higher. The dependent variable, what we are actually measuring, is the accuracy of the responses and the reaction time. To ensure valid results, our controlled variables have to be kept absolutely constant. This includes the presentation speed of the items, the total number of stimuli, and making sure we have a quiet testing environment. So, here is the exact procedure we follow in the lab. First, we seat the participant comfortably in front of a computer display. We explain the rule for the specific N-back condition we're testing. Then, the software presents a continuous sequence of letters or numbers at fixed intervals. The participant has to press a key whenever the current stimulus matches the one presented N positions earlier. Finally, the software records every single correct response, incorrect response, omission, and the exact reaction time down to the millisecond. Let's see how this builds in real time. I actually want you to mentally participate in a simulated trial right now. We are going to do a 2-back task together. That means you are looking for a letter that matches the one presented exactly 2 steps ago. Ready? Here is your first letter, T. Hold that in your mental workspace. Here is the second letter, L. Your brain must now actively hold on to both that T and the L, and keep them in the correct sequential order. The third letter is T. Now, does this match the letter presented exactly 2 steps ago? Yes, it absolutely does. The letter 2 steps back was T. To get this correct, your brain had to actively manipulate the sequence, match the current T with the first T, and safely discard the L from the 1-back position. But the task doesn't stop there. The next letter is F. You now have to drop that very first T entirely. Remember that the previous letter was T and the one before that was L. The N-back requires constant executive attention and cognitive flexibility.
You are continuously discarding old stimuli and updating your active workspace with new ones. It is quite the mental workout.
All right, Section 4, Analyzing Cognitive Load Performance Data. Now that you've physically felt what the task demands of your brain, let's talk about the data. If I asked you to predict which condition was harder, you'd undoubtedly guess the two-back, right? Well, the data confirms this perfectly. Participants generally perform with very high accuracy during a one-back task, where they just compare the current item to the immediately preceding one. But as we manipulate that independent variable and increase the working memory load to a two-back condition, accuracy predictably drops and reaction times slow down significantly. The crucial point is how cognitive psychology interprets these findings. This data definitively demonstrates that our working memory has a strictly limited capacity. As the amount of information that you must actively maintain and manipulate increases, cognitive performance becomes way more demanding. Higher memory load pushes our executive functioning to its absolute limits. It requires intense inhibitory control to suppress the irrelevant, older information and massive attentional control to keep updating the new sequence. It is worth noting, though, that while the NBAC is highly reliable, one minor limitation is its ecological validity. Pressing buttons for letters in a lab doesn't perfectly replicate the complex, messy nature of real-world multitasking, but it gives us an incredible baseline. Let's look at Section 5, Real-World Apps, Clinical and Educational. So why do neuroscientists and psychologists spend so much time in laboratories measuring this limited capacity workspace? Because it impacts almost everything we do. From an educational perspective, the NBAC task is profoundly important. Performance here correlates heavily with overall learning capacity. Think about reading comprehension for a second. To understand the end of a long sentence, your working memory has to hold on to the beginning of it while processing the middle. It's totally essential for language processing, maintaining classroom attention, and overall academic performance. Researchers even use insights from the NBAC to design cognitive training strategies to help folks whose working memory might be struggling to keep up with the demands of learning. And beyond the classroom, the clinical applications are just vast. Psychiatrists and neuropsychologists extensively use the NBAC task for cognitive assessments. It's a critical tool for evaluating ADHD, where executive attention is often impaired. It's used in dementia and aging studies to track cognitive decline, in schizophrenia research, and to assess recovery following a traumatic brain injury. Furthermore, when subjects perform the NBAC task inside an MRI machine, functional brain imaging allows researchers to literally see the prefrontal cortex, which is the brain's executive control center, lighting up and working hard in real time. Finally, Section 6, Key Takeaways. Summary. Let's wrap up our laboratory session and recap the main points we've discovered today. First, working memory is an active mental workspace fundamentally different from passive short-term storage. Second, the NBAC task is a brilliant, reliable laboratory method because it specifically measures the continuous updating and manipulation of information. Third, we observed that increasing the memory load, forcing the brain to hold more items further back in the sequence, predictably reduces accuracy and slows reaction times due to our brain's limited capacity. Finally, working memory isn't just a lab curiosity. It's the active mental engine enabling intelligent thinking, reasoning, learning, and everyday decision-making. Which leaves us with a pretty fun question to ponder. Is your mental workspace powerful enough to handle a 3-back task? Or what about even a 4-back? The human brain is an incredible, dynamic engine, and understanding its limits is the very first step to unlocking its full potential. Thank you so much for joining me in the lab today for this explainer to explore the fascinating mechanics of working memory.